Hey everybody, welcome back to Race of History. Today we're going to get into part 2 of the Seminal Tragedy, World War I by Extra History. Let's get into it.
Alright, the stage is set. Now let's put the players in their places. The curtain opens on the back of a rundown cafe in Belgrade. A young man comes in carrying a package and takes a seat at a table with a handful of other young men huddled around. They still to a hush as he opens the package. Inside is a single piece of paper, a newspaper clipping. The one who brought the package bends over to stare at the page. One of the other young men slides a candle across the table so he can better see. Before him, circled in red, is a headline, and it reads, Archduke Franz Ferdinand to visit Sarajevo. Now we skip ahead a few weeks. We're outside a palace. A resplendently dressed man and woman are getting in an open-top car, 100 years ago this year. He's dressed in bright, blazing blue. His chest is full of medals. On his head, a grand horsehair cap. She is wearing a flowing white dress and laughing. He helps her into the car. This is Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke of Austria, next in line for succession to the throne, accompanied by his wife Sophie. They've come to Sarajevo to watch military maneuvers, but really that's an excuse. It's their anniversary. They've come to get away from the stifling courts of Austria, where the Archduke's marriage to Sophie will never be accepted due to her low birth. She was, after all, only a countess. But things have been really tense in this part of the empire. The Serbian agitators have been acting with increased boldness to demand a Serbia free and independent from Austrian rule. And this day, of all days, falls on the anniversary of one of the greatest battles in Serbian history, the Battle of Kosovo. It's one of the great rallying points of the Serbian people, a point of national pride. To Serbian nationalists, this is one of their proudest days. And to them, for the Archduke of Austria, the symbol of their oppression, the embodiment of foreign rule, to come here on that day was the greatest insult. Now, perhaps the Archduke had chosen that day to show solidarity, to ease tensions, to make the people of Serbia understand that he cared about their traditions. Maybe he simply didn't know that the day had any special importance, and he was just there to get away. But whatever the reason, he was ill-informed. For on any other day, the events that are about to play out may not have happened.
Okay, so there are a lot of different opinions on why this particular time period was picked, why the day was picked for the parade and all of that for Franz Ferdinand. I fall in the group that thinks that it was very particular. Franz Ferdinand was more sympathetic to the cause of the Serbs than anybody else in the court in Austria, okay? So he is their greatest ally in the Austrian court, which is why it's so ironic that he is the one that is sought after. Because he's the one that, if Austria is going to give, if they're going to give Serbs their freedom, it's going to be kind of at his behest, at his pushing for that to happen. So all of this is kind of super ironic, unfortunate, the whole lead up to this war is kind of ironic and unfortunate.
Any other day, this might have turned out simply to be your average parade, an event which wouldn't even go down as a historical footnote in a long and prosperous rule. But something had to happen on this day. It was too symbolic, too important, too grand of a story. And so the first domino is placed in the mad and improbable events of this 28th day of June 1914. So here now, in the sleek black car, the royal couple begins to process down the streets of Sarajevo, flanked by 5 other cars filled with officials and guards. It's a parade. The streets are lined with onlookers, the route has been published, the world knows exactly where the Archduke is going to be. And those young men from that cafe in Belgrade are there in that crowd. They are nationalists. They're patriots. They're assassins and terrorists. They call themselves Young Serbia, and are part of the much more ominously named Black Hand. And they are angry. Angry in the way that only young men can be. And when I say young, I mean that barely any of them had reached the age of 20. They had in them an anger born of ideals, or they had ideals to rationalize their anger. A boldness born of a cause, or a cause to justify the brash kind of risk-taking that truly borders madness. But however you view them, here they were, hidden in the crowd, intent on killing the Archduke. One by one, the Archduke's car passes his would-be assassins. Nothing happens. No attempt on his life. Two of his assassins ended up succumbing to fear and couldn't go through with the deed. One felt pity for his wife sitting in the car and just couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger. Another one had an equipment malfunction. And so, one by one, Ferdinand passed them, none the wiser, smiling and waving to the crowd, smiling and waving in an open-top car so the world could better see. But at last, on the Commercia Bridge, an assassin finally steps forward and throws a bomb at the Archduke's car. Seconds before it lands, Ferdinand sees it and dives behind the door of the car as the bomb passes over him and bounces into the street behind. An explosion rips through the ground, mangling the car following them and leaving 20 people wounded and bleeding on the street. The assassin leaps over the side of the bridge to make his escape, but in the type of amateurish planning that would be comical if the circumstances weren't so grave, he fails to realize that the river below is only 4 inches deep, and he hurts his leg in the fall. In one last act of comic tragic bravado, the assassin swallows the cyanide pill he's been carrying, a final "you'll never take me alive" gesture, but alas, these young high school assassins had bought their suicide pills on the cheap, and this one was way past its shelf life. So the young man just sits quietly vomiting into the river while the police stroll down to take him very much alive. The motorcade races back the way it came, sirens screaming, and the city begins to lock down. Another of the young men, a 19-year-old named Gavrilo Princip, watches the cars go by, heart sinking. So it's done, he thinks to himself. It's off. The Archduke is alive. The assassination's failed. He is pretty bummed out. His hopes to be immortalized in the halls of Serbian heroes are dashed. All his dreams of glory just shattered. Overall, it's been a pretty lousy day. So he goes off to pout, thinking maybe a snack will make me feel better. This one young man's comfort snack may seem like a small thing, but it's on the small things that history often turns. Back at City Hall, the Archduke and the mayor are having words. The mayor proposes that the Archduke and Duchess should continue on their trip, but the Archduke thunders back something like, "Are you crazy? You'd have us visit museums while bombs explode on your streets?" And
Okay, so this all is kind of crazy because both of their ideas are so foreign to the modern day that it doesn't even make sense. So the mayor wants Franz Ferdinand to continue their trip as normal, right? To keep going as if nothing had happened. Franz Ferdinand wants to go visit the wounded people in the hospital from the bombing. Again, he's trying, like, there are assassins out there trying to kill him, and both of their ideas are to basically just go out and about as if nothing is happening. It's really kind of a bizarre, turn of events. I really like the way that Extra History does these videos. They set these up in a really cool way. Not focusing, solely on the war, but on the build-up, and then showing kind of how everything unravels in a very terrible, and when you know what the future holds, just, so unfortunate way.
And then, in a gesture of gallantry that you don't often see anymore, he proposes instead that they immediately visit the hospital where the wounded were taken after the attack.
Yeah.
So they don't hide him in a bunker or spirit him out of the country with a small army of guards like we would do today. Instead, they all pile out to the motorcade and start off towards the hospital. But nobody remembers to tell Franz Ferdinand's driver, and I should mention that this is the Archduke's personal chauffeur. Now, this fellow came along with the Archduke for the trip, but he's Austrian through and through. This guy does not know his way around Sarajevo. And so, as they're making their way through the city, the Archduke's driver makes a wrong turn onto Franz Joseph Street, a street named for the Archduke's father. Meanwhile, our failed assassin, Gavrilo Princip, is sitting outside a deli, eating his consolation snack and starting to feel maybe a little better. And maybe this won't be his only chance, he thinks. Maybe someday he'll have another shot at greatness. I mean, it was a really bad day, but who knows, it could still turn out okay. He'd have to go into hiding for a while, but Holy is that the Archduke? Yes, right there in front of him, in the same open-topped car, was the Archduke and his wife. The driver had taken a random wrong turn onto the street where Gavrilo Princip was having a sandwich, and their car had just stalled out trying to back up.
Yeah, so think about what has just happened for this to even come to this spot right here. Gavrilo Princip has to be at this particular deli on Franz Joseph Street. The Archduke has to decide that he's not going to get out of Sarajevo, even though there are assassins trying to kill him. He's going to stay in Sarajevo go visit the hospitals. The driver has to be Austrian and not know his way around Sarajevo and take this very specific wrong turn. And then, having realized he made a wrong turn, he has to stop the car and have it stall out when he's going to turn around. All of that has to, like, go wrong or happen in that exact way for this situation to come up in the exact way that it is.
3 strides away, Gavrilo can hear the Archduke and his wife talking from the car. No words, just actions. He stands up, he pulls out his pistol, and he fires 2 shots that change the world. The Archduke looks over, barely noticing the gendarmes wrestling the young man by the car to the ground. His only sight is for his wife, lying quietly on the floor of the car. He reaches out with a hand weak and heavy. Something's wrong with his neck. He can't quite think straight. He sees her and he utters one last wish. Sophie, Sophie, don't die. Live for our children. A man leans over him and asks if he's badly hurt, and he thinks he says, "It's nothing. It's nothing." He repeats the phrase, each time a little more quietly, and neither of them live through the hour. And so, our first act is done. A martyred prince and princess, or the death of oppressors. An act of terror or a heroic strike for freedom. An act that relied on 1,000 coincidences. On a poorly chosen date, on a change of plans, on a misinformed driver, and on a sad young man having a sandwich. But no matter how you look at it, it was an act that began the greatest war in history, and brought to an end the world that all of these actors knew. This war would change the world. Join us next time and find out how the world responds to this event.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. One, do you guys think that Serbia for sure, like the Serbian official government for sure had a hand in this assassination? There is a lot of evidence that there were elements within the Serbian government that knew about this. The evidence points towards it being at least tied to the Serbian government. But do you guys think that this was like official Serbian policy? Were there a few rogue Serbian government officials that were involved in it? What do you guys think about that? And then also, do you guys think Gavrilo Princip would have assassinated Franz Ferdinand if he knew what was going to start with that death? Because the thought process is he's fighting for a free Serbian people, right? But if he knew the carnage that was going to come from the First World War because of Franz Ferdinand's death, do you guys think he still pulls that trigger? This was World War I, the Seminal Tragedy, Part 2. As always, like, comment, subscribe. Help me keep building the channel over here, and I will see you all next time.